What is up, Terps fans? Welcome into another Fear the Podcast. I'm Matt Modderno. Pleased to be joined by our first ever repeat guest on the show here, Steve Gorgei of the Route 1 Rundown. I'm an amazing Maryland basketball podcast. It covers some football stuff there too, but a lot of Terps basketball talk for you if you want more of this kind of stuff. Also, the 295 Sports Minute, which is a great rundown of just everything going on here in local sports, which keeps me up to date. I can't watch my terrible O's right now, Steve, so you're keeping me apprised of what's going on with them. So first of all, thank you for doing that, and thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, thrilled to be back. First repeat guest, that's a big deal. I didn't realize that. So, man, I feel like I really got to bring it today. And I guess if I have to watch the O's on behalf of everybody, if that's my burden to bear, I guess I'll do that and keep everybody up to date. Look, I get a little pleasure like every 2-3 days. Dean Kramer gets a good start. Charlie Morton out of nowhere will go for 9 strikeouts in 5 innings. But it has been a tough season there. I don't know. I'm addicted. I can't stop watching. I'm going to keep watching, but I'm just thrilled to be here today and talking some Terps in the middle of July. I love it. Let's go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that the O's have taught me to never have expectations about a local team, no matter what I think is going to happen with them, because, if you just never have expectations, you can never be disappointed. But this Maryland basketball team, I've got a few little, rumblings of expectations for. We're going to get into it a little bit here with just some of like the transfer rankings and things like that. But let's start out with just the schedule. You did a great podcast just most recently about some of the stuff with the schedule. So I would encourage anybody to go back and listen to that. But a little more detail has come out since then about the Players Era Festival. It's going to be in Vegas right before Thanksgiving. It's a way to raise money for teams' NIL collectives. Every team playing in it gets $1 million, plus you get more if you actually win and succeed in the event. It's guaranteed 3 games in 3 days, which I think is really good preparation for a Terps team getting ready for the tournament. It's tough for the coaches, I think, to be able to scout those teams back to back to back like that. So it's a really good experience against really good teams. The Terps start out their first games on Monday, November 24th at midnight Eastern time. So anyone not going to the event, sorry for the late night in advance, against UNLV and new head coach Josh Passmore. So we'll see what he brings to the table. And their second game is at 9:30 Eastern, another late start. Not quite as bad this time though, but against Gonzaga on Tuesday, November 25th. And then their third game will be on that Wednesday, which is TBD right now. It depends on how they do the first 2 games. There is both a championship game and a third place game. And, you might be saying, if everybody's 2-0, how does that work? But they do it by like all kinds of like tiebreakers, total points and things like that, and margin of victory. So the Terps could go 2-0 in those first 2 games and find themselves, in a championship potentially, which would be a huge way to start the season out of the gate. But either way, you're guaranteed two really good games to start. And no matter who they play in that third game, it's still going to be another quad 1-ish kind of team here, Steve. So I'm excited about that schedule. Seeing them play Gonzaga has got me pretty hyped because I do think this is a gettable Gonzaga squad, but still good. And it'll be a fun watch no matter what.
Yeah, I'm pumped about it for a couple reasons. One, you just look at the list of schools in this tournament: Tennessee, Baylor, Kansas, Creighton, St. John's, Iowa State, Houston, Oregon, Auburn, Alabama, Gonzaga, Michigan, San Diego State. I mean, why would you not want to hold company with those type of schools?
That could just be the Sweet 16 next year,
Exactly. Exactly. Why would you not want to put yourself in a position to play those types of teams and be in a conversation with those types of teams? So I love it just from a buzz perspective, no pun intended there, but just getting some excitement going around the program, because I feel like so many times in the past, even last year, where us diehards who were watching night in and night out and flicking on Big 10 Plus to watch Derek Queen go off in his debut, knew something special was possible, knew this team had a little bit of something. But I think for the casual fan, it really didn't hit their radar until halfway through conference play that this is a Maryland team worth checking out. This is a Maryland team worth watching. So I think just being involved in these kind of events is really important, just from a generating buzz, generating excitement perspective, making people remember that basketball season starts before mid-February. So I love it from that perspective. I'm also a huge fan of let's play big games and challenge ourselves. I think you learn so much more, even with the team that's still gelling, even with a team that's still learning to play with one another, from playing good competition than playing teams that are ranked 300 plus in KenPom that you are just more talented than. You can roll the ball out there and you can go beat. And then the last thing is last year, how much talk was there as Maryland started to look better with the eye test about their non-conference strength of
Yeah.
schedule and how it was
Didn't do them
holding
any
them back,
favors.
and it was the reason they couldn't jump up seed line. So from all of those perspectives, I love it. And then you add on the fact that this is an opportunity for the players to go actually get some money on their own. I think that's just another great thing. And you got to give Buzz Williams some kudos, because I think without him at the helm, they wouldn't be playing at this tournament. From what I understand, it was his relationship that got them into this tournament. So I'm pumped about this tournament outside of the midnight Monday night tip there to start it off.
I am planning to go to this, so I'm pretty hyped about that. We'll see if it actually materializes, but that is the plan right now, largely because I just don't want to stay up that late on East Coast time. So I might as well just pay the money and go see it in person. But also, I just think it'd be a cool thing to see them do this. And I'm less likely to get to Maui the year after because of just how far it is. But we'll see if my family is okay with me missing Thanksgiving essentially to fly home from a basketball tournament. So TBD. But the part about this is like, it's not just a murderer's row of good teams. It's like an eclectic mix of styles, and there's some good mid majors in there. And I think that, to your point, like last year in the tournament, like Colorado State was obviously a good team, but no one played like them stylistically of any of the teams in the Big Ten. So it was sort of just like, oh shit, like, well, they're small, but they're good and they rebound still somehow. Like playing a New Mexico team, or sorry, UNLV team. I keep doing that, mixing those two teams up for some reason. And Gonzaga, like, they're basically, a blue blood-ish kind of team right now, but they do play a little differently. They're going to have a huge front court. This is kind of a small Maryland team. So it'll just kind of teach them what they need to get ready for, come postseason when they play some of these bigger teams. So I love everything about this. I think those are two winnable games. If anyone remembers Maryland's game against Grand Canyon last year, their best player, Tyon Grant Foster, is now on this Gonzaga team. So maybe we could go 2-0 against him in his 8-year college basketball career. But they've still got some dudes. So I think that'll be super cool. And, playing Alabama in the third game or whatever the case may be, is just great practice. So Steve, just in general, where are you at with this Terp schedule? I know you also listened to a conversation with Buzz Williams that he had with John Rothstein, and he had some thoughts on the schedule. So I've not heard that yet. I'd love to just kick it over to you and get your reaction to that and what you heard from Buzz's comments.
Yeah, real quick before I dive into Buzz's comments on Rothstein's show, I think it's such a great point about playing different styles and different types of teams to really prepare you for tournament time, because the Big Ten can be a little bit it can be a little bit of a grind. It can be a little bit of a monolith where everybody is playing in a very similar style. It's a very over scouted, over coached league. I feel like it's one where everybody knows everything about each other, and a lot of the teams play in a very similar manner. Now it's changing a little bit with the addition of some of the West Coast schools, I think, and even some of the coaching hires. It might change here, but I kind of think it's part of the reason that the Big Ten has this 20-odd year title drought at this point, and I think it can only be a good thing. I don't think it's the entire reason, but I don't think it helps that for 3 straight months you are seeing the same types of things. You have games officiated the same types of ways, and then you get into this tournament scenario and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? So I agree wholeheartedly that it's a really good thing to play teams that play different stylistically. As far as the rest of the schedule, I talked on my show about, I'm really excited about the fact that they play Virginia. They have a 4-year home and home with the Cavs. It's 2 in College Park, 2 in Charlottesville. I love that. That'll start this season. Same thing with Georgetown. There's going to be 2
huge.
at Capital One Arena, 2 at Xfinity Center over the next 4 years. Love that as well. And then they're going to finish up a home and home with Marquette up in Milwaukee this season. Now, John Rothstein asked Buzz Williams, is this the kind of schedule, non-conference schedule, we can expect from you at Maryland every year? And what he kind of insinuated was that, some of this stuff was in the works and agreed upon before he got there, and was not changeable. He felt like maybe they overscheduled a little bit, but at the same time, he did say he was cognizant of the fact that the net is most important now, and that win-loss records might not always be what coaches want. So he kind of mentioned he feels like it's maybe a little bit of an overschedule. Maybe don't expect to see this every single year, but at the same time, it does sound like he is living in 2025 when it comes to it's not 20 wins that gets you in the tournament. It's a good net and a good resume that
Smart.
gets you into the tournament. The other interesting thing he mentioned was that Marquette game. Of course, Buzz Williams coached at Marquette, had a lot of success at Marquette. He had mentioned on that show one of the first things he asked was, is there any way we can get out of that game? And they basically told him, no, the contract signed. We played them last year, and we're going to have to go play them again at some point up there. It just sounds like that's a place that'll be a very emotional game for him returning to Marquette. He talked about the fact that he still has a lot of good basketball connections up there in Wisconsin. Clearly a very meaningful place for him. And you've got to remember the fact that Marquette hired him after he had been a head coach at New Orleans for one season.
Right.
He had 1 year of
It's a big leap of faith.
A huge leap of faith. So it sounds like that will be a very emotional game for him, and there's a lot that goes into that.
He also took over a team with like future NBA players, and that's like, they had a ready-to-go team and gave the keys to an unproven guy expecting some success, and that was the last real basketball school he was at and probably his most successful stop. So that's hopefully the parallel you can make here at Maryland. Like, here we care about it, and maybe he has similar luck here as well. A couple of things you hit on there I just want to touch on real quick. You mentioned just how the net works and things like that. Like, you've seen teams like Iowa State get good high seeds because they've just punished terrible teams. So if you're gonna play bad teams, you better beat them by 70 every time, or you should just play the best people you can. And even if you lose to Alabama, at least you lose close. It counts as a good result, essentially. And the way Maryland plays, I just don't think they're going to get like run off the court all that often. It's going to be some close rock fights, and maybe they just don't shoot well enough, to pull off the upset or whatever. So I think the better teams you play, and you can just guarantee you play them close most of the time, is to your benefit. And then the Georgetown game you hit on there too. Like, that last time, like that last one I went to at Capital One Arena against that, like, a Maryland win, it was the most fun I've had. Went after work with some coworkers. Like, it was just like the best time. So having those two teams, I think Georgetown probably is about the same this year. They lose Thomas Sorber, but they bring in a lot of other pieces on the perimeter. So I think they'll probably be just okay-ish, not like a juggernaut. So it's a winnable game, but just the local like vibes will be immaculate, for a game like that. So I'm stoked they're doing that. And if Buzz thinks this is a slight overschedule, but not like he's going to go totally the other way next year, like, I can live with that too. But we as fans want to see good teams. And even if they lose, but they schedule well, I think most normal basketball fans can understand, like, oh, we lost close to Marquette. Like, that's not a big deal. Yeah. As opposed to like, oh no, we won another game against Alcorn State by 106 points. Like, that's just not getting anybody excited at this point.
Look, man, there's nothing less fun to me than driving to College Park on a Monday night to sit with 5,000 other people. I don't care what those official attendance numbers say. I'm telling you, there were some of those games that were 5,000 people there. There's nothing less fun to me than doing that. Like, it feels so minor league. It feels like, why am I spending my time and money to do this when this is nothing more than truly a glorified exhibition? Mm-hmm. And to your point on the Georgetown game, like, that is the kind of stuff that I think is so important, just building excitement in this area again around the sport of college basketball. That's been a dormant rivalry for so long. And, in part, Georgetown hasn't been good enough for it to really be a rivalry. They do need to step their game up too. But I mean, I can remember even in the BB&T Classic days, Maryland GW was a rivalry to some extent because GW beat them a bunch of times with Pops Mensah-Bonsu. I'll never forget him and ripping my heart out when I was, 15.
Those Carl Hobbs teams in general were like so tough. I mean, like that, I hated playing them. Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that makes you feel like college basketball matters in this area, in an area that's so dominated by the NFL. And it was driving me nuts last season how many games were on non-conference games, and even some conference games early, like the Purdue game was on an NFL Sunday. And like it just hurt me because I know that nobody around here was paying attention to how good this team was or could be, and it was a team worth paying attention to. So I just think early on in the transition to the Big Ten, Maryland lost so much of that tradition, those rivalries, those games that mattered. You felt disconnected. For me personally, like I know I felt disconnected from what I had always known and loved about Maryland basketball, and it made me feel more disconnected from the sport of college basketball as a whole too. So I think I don't feel that way now. I actually feel a lot differently. I'm thrilled that they're in the Big Ten. I think they've developed some real rivalries. I think actually on my next episode, I'm going to rank Maryland's top 5 Big Ten basketball rivalries now.
I love that. Yeah,
so I'm going to do that soon because I think there are some real ones. I think a decade plus has led to that. But I still think it's important for these local, regional rivalries to thrive because it's just part of what makes college basketball special.
There's a reasonable percentage of the people listening to this that are sick of Kevin Willard references every episode, so I promise I won't keep doing it. But as you talk through that, I just thought of something I heard him recently say about he was happy to be at Villanova at moving away from a football school where no one cared about basketball until the spring. And it's like, dude, have you seen attendance at Maryland football games? Like, no one's coming to Maryland games in November because you're playing, Jacksonville State. Like, no disrespect, it's just not a hyped matchup. But playing Georgetown will get butts in seats regardless of where it's hosted. And Jeff Erman just reported on InsideMDSports this week that Maryland is looking to make a real run at Bishop McNamara, guard, wing, whatever you want to call him, Caden Samuels from Team Takeover. That's also a team that Georgetown is going after really hard. And these younger kids, the thing I learned is like they rarely know like the history going back really far. Like you hear them mention like, oh, I go all the way back with Maryland all the way to the Jameer Young days. And it's like, well, okay. Or like maybe you get an Anthony Cowan.
A million years old.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the deepest any of these guys are really going. So they don't have the history. So reestablishing, some local dominance, for lack of a better term, I think has some impact. And if you're deciding between those two schools ultimately because you have a local family who wants to come to your games and Maryland just smacks them, I think that makes a difference. So I'm glad to see that kind of stuff here as well from a recruiting perspective. So let's talk about the actual roster here and just go into what the team is made up of and things like that. And so we've both recently took a look at some of these like transfer lists and whatnot. So I want to start with the mothership here at 24/7. Maryland's ranked 5th in their Big 10 transfer list. So it's Michigan, which makes sense. You get probably the number 1 player in the portal in Yaxel Lindenberg. And then USC, they get Rodney Rice, obviously, and Chad Baker-Mazara and guys like that. Iowa brings over Bennett Sturts with them, so that makes some sense. Indiana is always high on these lists somehow, which, it is what it is. And then you look at Maryland just coming in that 5th slot, followed by UCLA and Illinois. I think that's reasonable just looking at these rosters. It's not saying the 5th best roster in the Big Ten. It's who had the best transfer classes. And the way 24/7 did is they did total recruits brought in and then the stars of those recruits. So Maryland has 7 4-star transfers and 2 3-star transfers. That's the second most amount of incoming transfers total with 9. Minnesota is bringing in 9 as well. Indiana has 10. So they're totally starting over here as well. And then a few other teams, ended up higher than them just for their, maybe they got a 5-star or something like that, even though they brought in a couple less guys. But let's just start with the 24/7 ranking there. Like, Steve, how do you feel about like any of those teams that are ahead of them that you feel like Maryland had a better, transfer class then, or do you think that's about right?
Well, let me just take a little shot at Kevin Willard first.
There you go. Okay, please. Yeah, of course. I didn't mean to not give you the opportunity to do that.
At a football school and so excited to get back to a basketball school. Michigan. Are they a football school? Because they won a national championship in the sport 2 years ago.
Last I checked, they're pretty good at football.
The number 1 transfer recruit in the country in Lindenberg. Okay, yeah, that's a football school. They seem to be doing okay. The team that won the national championship last year and is bringing in Boogie Flan from Arkansas, Florida. Yeah, I think they have a pretty good football reputation. So it always makes me laugh, like when all this talk was going on about how the Big East schools were going to be at such an advantage because they don't have to support football. Look, football drives this whole enterprise.
Yeah.
Football brings in the cash, and basketball does too, but football is really the driver of this ship. I refuse to believe that if you're in a Power 2 conference, the SEC and the Big 10, that really control this whole football enterprise now at this point, that you will not continue to be at some sort of advantage in basketball, because you're just going to have more money coming in. And I remain skeptical of, I know the House settlement went into effect earlier this week. I remain skeptical of how much that $600 clearinghouse deal is really going to be policed, and how much you can truly enforce it and police it. And you know what the great thing is? If you're Maryland, you have a little company in your back pocket named Under Armour who can sign legitimate business deals to all these guys, and I don't think anybody could possibly question. So I just had to call that out, because it reminded me, it got me a little fired up again, just the fact that it's so disingenuous, and I continue to find it disingenuous. But anyway, as it relates to those Big 10 transfer rankings, no, I think it's pretty fair. I think it's it's really hard to argue with the Michigan thing. It's really hard to argue with the Iowa thing, with UCLA bringing in Donovan Dent, with just some of the guys being brought in that are really top-end, high-end guys. I really can't find much of a problem with where Maryland is ranked right now, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you wanted to nitpick and argue one spot either direction, something like that, like, people seem to really like this Illinois class overall. Maryland being ahead of them, I think, is actually a good reflection on who they brought in. Bart Torvik has a similar list. He ranked the Terps 6th in Big 10 in terms of projected production from transfers. So the teams ahead of them were Washington, Indiana, USC, Minnesota, and Iowa, which is a slightly different list. But those are also teams that brought in like totally new groups as well. Like Washington is starting over with a lot of new faces. Minnesota is almost a total rebuild there. Like the Indiana we talked about already, needing a lot of new faces. So that's not too surprising. And I think some of this is the people Maryland are bringing in that they're expecting to produce aren't necessarily guys that had a ton of like box score production last year. Pharrel Payne is probably better or more impactful than his, 10 points and 5 rebounds. Solomon Washington, you had a great conversation with Isaac Trotter about him and his value on the defensive end. That makes sense. You look at, Turkson and Mills, who I expect to contribute a lot to this team. They have no stats. So anything that Torvik does from those guys is really just sort of a discrepancy, and they just had better like offensive rating and things like that than some of the Maryland guys. So like David Coit, it's basing him off of last year's Kansas stats as opposed to what he did at Northern Illinois. So I think there's a chance for Maryland to kind of quickly, change the narrative from a stats-based production if some of these guys kind of take a jump forward, essentially.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's where, when you look at some of these guys that Maryland has landed, you can kind of classify them into a couple different groups. Like, I feel there are guys like Pharrel Payne. He's low floor guy. You know what you're getting. The floor is high. He's going to produce on a night in and night out basis. How high is his ceiling? I mean, I think there's still a ceiling there. I think he could take another step. He's a guy who really only averages like 20 minutes a game the past couple years. But that's kind of a Buzz Williams thing, right? He's going to play a ton of guys. It's not, I don't know if we'll ever see him play 34 minutes a night or anything like that, but I know he is a very productive player. He was a very productive player in the best basketball conference in America last season. Like, I'm
in the tournament as well.
Confident about his floor on this team. But I think there's some other guys where it's like, okay, last year, Maryland really hit the high end of expectations with almost their whole transfer class. Jacoby Gillespie was like a roughly top 50 transfer prospect, but hit on the high end with him. Rodney Rice was way down there. He was, I looked at it this morning. Rodney Rice per 24/7 was 159. He was 159 last year. So that's roughly equivalent to where like Elijah Saunders is or Myles Rice is this season. They hit on him in a big way. So there's some other guys like a Myles Rice. Does he bounce back, and can he hit a higher ceiling? Because we know he has a way higher ceiling than what he showed at Indiana last year. So, when all is said and done, I I don't mind Maryland being where they are, like in the upper third of the Big Ten when it comes to these rankings. And I don't mind seeing them kind of projected as a bubble team, because I think if you simulated all of this 100 or 1,000 or a million times, that's probably the most likely outcome, is they finish in that area. But there's some high ends and there's some low ends there too. And I think the high end is probably pretty drastically different from the low end.
Yeah, I think I would split the difference almost, which is why I think they'll probably be top half of the Big Ten ultimately, but maybe not much higher than that. Largely because I think a few guys will pan out and maybe a few, won't do what we hope they would do. On3 has them 9th in their transfer rankings, but they do it a little differently. They consider different factors like outgoing transfer production. So given who Maryland's losing, like it's really hard to offset Gillespie and Rice going out from a production standpoint. So I think that makes sense. They also had the lowest adjusted NIL value in the Big Ten, which is an interesting way that they go through that. And some of their projections on NIL dollars for guys don't really make a lot of sense anyway. So I don't know how much stock to put in that. And then Evan Miyakawa from evanmia.com, for anybody who's not familiar, does an analytics site, really interesting stuff too, has the Terps ranked 10th. And they do another kind of look at this where they factor guys that are outbound as well. And, that's, I think it kind of just keep hurting them. But yeah, having them 10th there is a little lower than I would think looking at this class, because it's also, some of these guys are looking at the list from a star power at the top, like quality perspective. Whereas I think the way Buzz Williams plays, there is value in having quantity and good depth here. And I think that's, for people that were sick of seeing the Crab Five and nobody else last year, I think this year's team is almost going to be like the inverse of that, where you don't have the star power, but like the 10th best guy on the team is about as good as the 4th best guy on the team. And I think that's pretty huge for them as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's exactly what you're going to see. And when I think about these guys individually, it's all for me about what role they are playing. What role are you asking them to play? Because I feel like so many times, especially in the Turkson era, all the teams, all the players that Maryland fans would get really frustrated with, and myself included at times, were guys I think that were just asked to do too much, that were asked to do really more than they were capable of. So how much are you asking from a Pharrel Payne? Like, are you asking him to go out there and play 32 minutes a night and be your leading scorer? If you are, I think you might leave with a different impression of him after his year at Maryland than you did after his time at Texas A&M, because that might just be too large of a role for him. But, I don't know. When I look at him, and I do, if you're okay with this, I want to get into him a little bit in particular.
Well, yeah, we'll go through the whole list top to bottom. So he's first on the On3 list, 72nd in the country, 20th in the conference. So take it.
Yeah, so let's get into him. And when I look at him, like, he's a guy, proven productivity in the SEC. You look at his tournament last year, Incredible. He had an unbelievable NCAA tournament, even in the loss to Michigan, and we know all about those two bigs. I mean, he had a fantastic game. So I have very little concern coming in about how he's going to be able to acquit himself, again, given the right role. When I look at some of the guys ahead of him, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, you look at a guy who we're fairly familiar with in Ade Mara, who was at UCLA, who's transferring to Michigan. He's going to probably come off the bench for Michigan because they have Lendeborg and Morez Johnson, the Illinois transfer, who are probably going to be their starting front court. And
what a good under-19 tournament as well, by the way. Yes. Like, he's playing well at the moment, and Mara is still yet to do much on a college basketball court.
Exactly. And so Mara, I was trying to bring it up. I lost it here, but I think he was around 33rd in On3's rankings. Now, if I asked you right now, Matt, who would you take to contribute more to a winning basketball team in 2026, a tournament team? Are you taking Pharrel Payne or are you taking Ade Mara?
Just looking at who's going to have the opportunity, it's going to be Payne. Like, there aren't a ton of other bigs on this team. Colin Metcalf is probably the only other center type you can rely on here. So Payne is going to have huge opportunity. But just even on paper, I think he's just a better player. Like, Mara's good at being bigger, I guess. Like, that's the one like size advantage he has over Pharrel Payne. But otherwise, like, Payne's a better athlete, runs the floor harder. I think he just fits in stylistically with this Maryland team. And obviously he's got the value of knowing how Buzz Williams wants to play. So I think he can hit the ground running. Whereas like, maybe Mara benefits from a change of scenery, but I think this is something you see with recruiting rankings in general is people just don't want to give up on the fact that they had a guy ranked as like an NBA prospect going into college and he hasn't panned out. So we're just going to cling to that until, he's in his senior year at Western Tennessee Community College, putting up like 11-7.
Yeah, or you don't want to give up on that size, right? It's easy to get addicted to size, especially in the Big Ten. So I just, when I look at Payne, I just trust him a lot more to be a competent piece than I do in a Daymar. And that's why I think that 72nd number, 20th in the Big Ten in on-3 rankings, is just low. And another guy I was kind of comparing him to through 3 years is, I honestly think he compares pretty favorably to Julian Reese through 3 years. Now, I think Reese was asked to carry a much heavier load. Sure. He was asked to do more, but even down to the poor free throw shooting numbers for both and the great block and offensive rebounding percentage, I think those are guys. I think Julian Reese compares pretty favorably to Pharrel Payne through 3 years. Now, I think Julian Reese took a massive step up in his senior year. I think Julian Reese benefited a ton from playing next to Derek Queen, but Derek Queen also benefited a ton from playing next to Julian Reese. I'm not saying that Pharrel Payne is Julian Reese right now, or that he will make that kind of transformation in his senior year. I just think the drop-off is maybe not as significant as people may think if you haven't watched Pharrel Payne play a lot. And so that really encourages me, and I'm really high on what we can expect to see from him coming into College Park.
I think Buzz does seem to trust his veteran players here too. So Payne being there a little longer now, they've got more familiarity. You see him maybe go from 20 minutes a game to like 27, 28. And I think that extra, 2 TV timeouts worth of play, we're going to see the numbers go up a decent amount here no matter what. So if he's 14-8 next year, I mean, that probably puts you right on par with about where Reese was for the year. So I'm totally with you. Next guy on the list, Myles Rice. He's 134 nationally for on-3 and 29th in the Big Ten. I think this is one where they're like almost punishing him too hard for last year's tough season. I got to imagine he was much higher the year before going into the year coming out of Washington State, where everybody thought like, he was the next guy or guard of the future kind of thing. So
he was 24th, Matt, by 24/7.
24th nationally. And now he's lower in the Big Ten after one just sort of junky, messy season in Indiana. Like, I blame Indiana for that, not Myles Rice personally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. He's the kind of guy, like, I am willing to wipe that whole season away because that situation was a disaster at Indiana. I don't know how anybody could come out of that place smelling like roses after that season and that mess. So,
which, Steve, by the way, that makes me happy because I can't wait to listen to the episode you're going to do on like just rivals and things like that. The fan base I dislike the most in the Big Ten is Indiana by a very large margin. Because like I made the comment last year before the year that Kevin Willard underachieved less often than Mike Woodson did. And they were like literally trolling me every time they barely beat Army by like single digit points throughout the year. Like, yeah, what now? I'm like, okay, cool. We just beat Canisius by 72. I wouldn't brag about that either, but at least we did beat them by a significant margin. So that fan base, they suck largely. And them being a shit show last year makes me happy. And I hope it stays that way forever, essentially.
It's so funny you say that because as I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I want to put Indiana on this list, and spoiler, I will. They will be in that top 5. But I'm like, how can Indiana be on the list, but Purdue can't, given that they've been the creme de la creme of the league? Like, when a team comes into Xfinity, people are excited to see Purdue. But my feelings about Purdue are so much different than my feelings about Indiana. I kind of look at Matt Painter and Purdue in that program. I'm like, wow, that's a great program. And when we beat them, I'm like, that's awesome. That's
high
great.
five, everybody.
there's no ill will for
No.
me anyway towards Purdue. For Indiana, it's completely different. I feel exactly like you do. So I'm glad we're on the same page there. And Myles Rice probably feels similarly too.
I hope so. I want him to have revenge games every time
I
we
would
play
like
them.
that very much as well. And I think he's a guy who's primed to. I spent a little bit of time this week watching the 2024 NCAA tournament game. Washington State played against Iowa State. Iowa State ultimately ended up winning that game. But Iowa State is a program I have so much respect for. TJ Altenberg, I think, is a great coach, especially a great defensive coach. I really like that program, and I like watching players play against the best. So that's probably why I wanted to watch that.
Sure.
When I watched Myles Rice in that game, I was really impressed with his poise and composure against an aggressive pressure defense from Iowa State that has some length, that is physical, that's used to playing in a Big 12 that is long and physical.
Yep.
I was really impressed with the way Myles Rice was able to navigate that and handle it. I was impressed by his composure. I was impressed by his passing ability. I was impressed with his ability to keep the dribble alive, get in the lane, score. The thing with Myles Rice is the shooting. It's the shooting, and he did not have a good shooting year at Washington State. He did not have a good shooting year last year. But his shot doesn't look bad.
No,
like, I am
I
not
agree.
a shot doctor. I'm not a shot expert. But look, I've shot the basketball a lot. I've watched a lot of people shoot basketballs at a very high level. You can tell when a shot's completely broken. His shot doesn't look completely broken. And I do wonder if just some confidence can help. And Buzz Williams is a guy who I think does instill confidence in his guys. As long as
He'll let you put him up and keep shooting too. Yeah.
Exactly. So I had Isaac Trotter on the show a couple weeks ago. I think he's one of the best in the country at just knowing the whole nation, and especially at a personnel level. And he is huge on Rice having a bounce back year. I kind of like him as a buy low as well.
Yep. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Elijah Saunders is 138th in their ranking, 30th in the Big 10. Rakease Passmore is 192, 41st in the country. I think that's one where we do benefit from the high school, pedigree and things like that, at least keeping him somewhere on the list. Solomon Washington, though, 198th overall and 42nd in the country. That's one where somebody purely based this on like what he does from a box score perspective and not an overall impact perspective. Like, there's just no way you could watch him play for that Texas A&M team last year and not think like he's the 42nd best addition in the conference, not best player in the conference, but addition. Like, having a bona fide wing stopper. And again, you guys touched on this a lot, was just he could be the best perimeter defender in the country this upcoming year, but he can also guard in the front court. He's great in transition. Like, I think this is a dude that could also see another, leap forward this year. If he just even makes like a few shots enough for people to have to guard him a little bit, it would be pretty interesting. So to me, having him the 42nd best transfer in the Big 10 is just way too low.
100%. He's look, whoever was doing this, and I'm not trying to throw shade at this because I know it's a hard job trying to track and rank all of these transfers. It's not one that I am envious of, but I think at the end of the day, it's okay. 5 points, 5 rebounds. He's a nothing guy, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Over the past year, I'm not there anymore, but I was one of the producers on SiriusXM SEC radio, right? So watched a lot of SEC basketball, talked to a lot of people who cover SEC basketball, are involved in SEC basketball. Anybody you talk to about Texas A&M would rave about Solo Washington, would rave about what he brings to the table. Buzz Williams would rave about what he brings to the table defensively. Isaac Trotter, again, who I had on the show a couple weeks ago, said he could be the best wing defender in the entire he's one of the best in the entire country, but he could be the best in the entire Big Ten. He said he could turn off anybody's water on any given night. To me, that speaks volumes. And if you need more, if you're like, okay, great, I don't really care about the eye test. According to Evan Maya, he had the fourth best DBPR in the whole SEC last season. He is a guy that is just a proven defensive player. He plays hard. He's a great offensive rebounder. Stop me if you've heard all this before, because it's like every guy we talk about under Buzz Williams, we say the same thing. And to top it all off, he is the self-proclaimed 5-star stopper. That's what he prides himself on. Like, I know, Matt, I know we're in this era of basketball where there's all these analytics, and I love them too. Like, I love diving into Ken Pom and Torvik. I think it's a huge help. If anybody wants to hook me up with a Synergy subscription, please let me know. I'd love to have it. I'll make it worth your while. But there is something to the fact that when you're a team and you have an identity, you need guys who embody that identity. And I can't think of somebody that embodies that Buzz Williams identity, that buzzball style of play, more than somebody who isn't going out there and saying, I get buckets. It's not, I'm the 5-star stopper. Yeah. That's my identity. That's my role on this team. Everybody raves about Solo Washington. And I think this is purely an example of 5 points, 5 rebounds, put him around 200.
You just look at some of the names ahead of him too. One being Rakease Passmore is one spot ahead of him in the Big Ten. And like, I want Passmore to be really good. I tried to watch a little high school tape, doing some prep for him transferring over. And it was like, okay, I like what I see here, but I'll take the proven guy who's coming over with his own coach. So he's kind of like a fake transfer, essentially. He's following a guy he's comfortable with. That should give you a leg up for the first third of the season, I feel like, where some of these other guys are going to have to learn the staff, learn their coach, learn the system, and these guys, you don't have to do it. Next on the list is Isaiah Watts. He was 233rd in the country. David Coit, 434. Like, that's crazy to me for a guy that's averaged 20 points per game at any level of college basketball, despite what happened last year. Andre Mills, 527, and George Turkson, 529. I get they're hard to evaluate because they're sort of, total unknown commodities there, but still, it just feels like maybe we're sleeping on a couple dudes here a little bit. And I love this because I picture Buzz being a guy that's printed those things out and stamped them, on the side of the locker room for those guys to look at every day. And it's like, hey, Mills, are you really the 500th best player in the country or transfer in the country? Not even best player, but transfer. Like, that's just kind of nuts to me personally.
So I'll reference the interview Buzz did with John Rothstein again here. Rothstein asked him about, outside of kind of the main guys that we've talked about already, who do you think, I don't know how they phrased it, a contributor, a surprise, whatever, basically who's going to make an impact. And Diggy Coit was somebody that he called out by name. And, when Coit committed, I kind of looked at it and I was like, okay, I'm not going to really spend too much time thinking about this guy. But between the interview you did with Derek Johnson on your show and then listening to Buzz Williams yesterday, I think my perception is kind of changing on what he could be. Again, it's all going to be about a role. Like, I don't foresee a scenario or want there to be a scenario where he's playing 25 minutes a game, right? But if you're playing him spot minutes, if he's playing 10, 15 minutes a game, I think he can be a contributor. Sure. It meant something to me when Derek Johnson said the Kansas staff wanted him back after the season. Like, I think that really is a meaningful thing. And absolutely. I don't know what transpired after that, but there was a time where the Kansas staff was excited about getting him back. And then when you listen to Buzz Williams talk about him in the Rothstein interview, he talked about how he liked the pace that he plays at. He thinks it's difficult guarding a small, fast guard like that. And I think guards like that, we've seen it even with really good guards like an Anthony Cowan, like a Jameer Young, smaller guards. You can get worn down in the Big Ten as a lead guard when you have to carry a huge load. But if he doesn't have to carry a huge load, I think you can be really effective off the bench as somebody playing a different style of basketball, giving teams a different look than they're seeing night in and night out, or even in that game. So I'm excited about Diggy Coit and what he might be able to provide. What Isaac Trotter had said to me was when he is making his threes, he's a completely different player. Yep. When he's not, when he's off, some of those issues that he has get exacerbated a little bit more. So it might be a thing thing, and it sounds like that was kind of the deal at Kansas too, where if he came in and he was hot right off the bat, then he was going to get some minutes. If not, then maybe it was going to be a short night for him. So, look, it's hard to, once you get down to this point of the rankings, it's hard to like quibble too much with it. But you're right, like to compare him, he's more proven at the college level than Passmore is.
Yeah, to be 250 spots lower, I just kind of can't make the math there. But either way, based on all of those things, I'm sure the bracketologists already looking at all of these factors and where they are on these different lists and what the metrics say. Summarizing all of those things, ESPN's Joe Lunardi has Maryland projected as a 10 seed in this year's tournament, getting one of the last 4 buys into the field. Overall, they're not ranked anywhere on John Fanta's way too early top 25, ESPN's early top 25 rankings, or Gary Parrish at CBS's top 25 and 1. SI doesn't have them ranked. And at Bart Torvik, they're the 37th best team heading into 2026. That actually seems kind of fair to me based on where they are from a proven commodity perspective here. I think they have an opportunity to exceed that. Like, if they played their way into a 7 seed next year, it wouldn't really shock me. But if they kind of, or 8th in the Big 10, end up a 10 seed and finish, the 30-something best team or 40th best team in the country, whatever the case may be, like I wouldn't really be all that shocked either.
I think the biggest thing for me, Matt, is you look at some of the teams last year that came into the year with very low minutes continuity. You think about a team like Arkansas. You think about a team like Louisville. Can Maryland improve over the course of the season like those teams did? I mean, Louisville in Pat Kelsey's first year had an awesome year 1, but let me just remind you, there was a point where they were 6-5 on the season. Their losses were to some very good teams, but they were 6-5 to start the year, and they went on a tear in ACC play, end up making the tournament, and everybody's raving about Pat Kelsey in year 1. Arkansas. Look, I'm not trying to compare that situation. It's a little different. Cal obviously brought a lot of guys over from Kentucky, but Buzz is bringing some guys from A&M, maybe not the same caliber of player, but I will tell you this, again, we were all ready over on SEC Radio to bury Cal and that Arkansas team in early January. It's like he really doesn't have it anymore, and he's not going to get it done at Arkansas. Like I can remember sitting there and taking phone calls from Arkansas fans and like getting ready to do shows and get his sound ready where he just sounded like it was done.
Defeated.
And then, boom,
exactly.
They turn it around, right? So like to me this year, I just want to see them get better. I want to see them be a better team in March than they are in November.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That's where they're at is kind of fair because there's a wide range of outcomes. If you hit on everything right and Myles Rice goes back to being the player that he was at Washington State and Isaiah Watts continues to improve and step up into a bigger role and he's that outside shooting threat and Darius Adams comes in and he plays like a McDonald's All-American and he can give you some scoring and you're not entirely relying on those two former Washington State guys to get scoring at the guard spot, and you don't have to rely on Pharrel Payne night in and night out to be your leading scorer, and Solo Washington is giving you what he does every night on the defensive side of the ball, plus he throws in a few more games like that Georgia game where he just goes off for 17 points. Like, there's a decently high ceiling for a team like that. I probably still not as high as last year's because I don't see an elite player. There's not a lottery pick on this team like Derek Queen. So it's probably not that high. But you also run the risk of most of these guys have never played together, although most of them have played with like one or two other players. That's kind of a weird thing. But you run the risk anytime you're putting together a team like that of maybe it just all goes boom and doesn't work and you're looking at a team that when I think about like how does this go wrong, and you tell me if I'm off here or you feel differently, when I think about like how this could go wrong, it's not enough shooting, And this front court maybe can't match up with a Big
Well, too
Ten
thin.
front court night in and night out. Like, there's a lot of guys on this roster that are 6'7" through 6'9", and I think it's going to be a really versatile lineup, which I like a lot. But there is still something in the Big Ten to having some guys that can just go head to head with like a Stephen Crow, a 7-footer, and Stephen Crow, who I think is finally out of the league at this point. But look, there's always going to be Stephen Krause in the league. There's always going to be Jackson Kohlers in the league. There's always going to be size and physicality in the Big Ten. And as athletic as Maryland is, I still do wonder about the depth in the front court and how it withstands the wear and tear night in and night out. So again, I see it going one way. I see the ceiling there. I think if Myles Rice is the Myles Rice that we saw at Washington State and Pharrel Payne is the double-double machine that we expect, it's like, okay, that's a tournament team, and it's a tournament team. And if not, and some of those challenges show their ugly face, then they're on the wrong side of the bubble. So I think, say all that to say, I think where they're at as a bubble team going into the season is incredibly fair.
All fair. I think all of those things are reasonable. One of the things Mike LaTulip and I talked about last podcast was just, or 2 podcasts ago by this point, was just the pace is going to be important for this group. If you have a lot of depth, a lot of athletes, like just get out and run. You don't have a lot of shooting. That's one way to put pressure on people. Swarm them defensively, and then just, hit the gas essentially every time you get the ball. I think that'll help them a lot. But
it's kind of how Michigan State won the league last year, right?
Right. It's exactly what you got to lean into is trying to create free offense when you don't have like guaranteed guys to get it for you. And you talked a lot about the continuity piece of it there. I think glass half full for this is at least Buzz returns 2 starters. Like Maryland doesn't. They're in New Jersey's, but they're the same 2 guys for the same coach. You mentioned the familiarity there. If some of these guys have them with other people, like I think Rice is going to play a decent amount of minutes next to Isaiah Watts, and they're comfortable together. If you put David Coit and Rakease Passmore together, like there's some familiarity and some comfort there. So I think that'll help this team maybe gel a little quicker because you've got a few guys who at least understand how to play with somebody else they may be paired up with a decent amount of the time. And I'd love to see those guys kind of platooned together some, to like give you a little of that continuity in these lineups. And you look at the teams that hit the ground running last season, they were teams that brought a lot of people back. And I think that, like, you look at Gonzaga, like they started out like gangbusters at the beginning of the year. They pummeled Baylor to start the season because they brought the majority of those guys back from the year before. You don't have that exact same situation here, but again, there's enough pieces that know each other. And given the style they play, like, not to denigrate Buzz as an X's and O's coach, but a lot of this is like be tough, be physical, overwhelm people. These dudes are kind of built to do that. And I think, to your point, like that's something that's going to gel and click, and they can add more layers to it over the course of the year. But there's a good foundation of like some of these things. Maybe they can steal a few early season wins against good teams because just the way they're built makes them more ready to go, in early November than somebody else may be. So if they can just go 2-1 or something at Players Era, that may help you massively come seed line in tournament time. So maybe that does help you get up to a 7 or 8 seed or something like that because you have a few non-conference wins. It maybe offsets a little bit of just the wear and tear of what you get in the Big Ten. And again, it is a physical conference. So just having more depth, I think you maybe have more fresh legs. You can platoon guys more. I think there's some opportunities here for them to maybe overachieve what they look like on paper. And I think that's just what you're banking on at this point. If you're a Maryland fan, hoping for something closer to last year than the year before that.
I will say, I feel like a lot of people are not into the general concept of buzzball, and I get it to some extent. Especially the lack of for me, it's really the lack of shooting.
Yeah, a little bit more would be nice.
Concerning the past couple of years, but I don't hate the idea of zagging in a league where everybody's zigging, right? Yep. And again, the league has changed a little bit. There's more diversity of styles of play now, but at the end of the day, it is still the Big Ten. And I do wonder, like, I've always kind of thought ever since Maryland joined the league, Maryland could have an advantage with its athleticism. Just given you think about the guys, and we don't need to go down this whole road of like all the guys in Baltimore, in DC, in PG County who have gotten away over the years, but when you think of those guys, like when you think of a New York City guard, it's always like an undersized, quick point guard, right? But like I feel like the DMV in Baltimore produces really athletic guys, like
Dude,
long
it's-
guys, athletic guys. And I've always felt like Maryland could have an advantage against Big Ten teams if they leaned into that style of play. And I think we're going to find out about it a little bit because we don't have a lot of guys from the area on the roster, but we sure do have a lot of long athletic guys on this roster. And that's kind of how Buzz Williams liked to play. So I don't hate the zag. And I think it's going to be interesting to track and see, like, do teams have issues adjusting to that when they have to play Maryland?
It's harder to scout when you only see a team play this way, once, twice a season, as opposed to, okay, they play the same way everyone else plays, and we're just kind of doing our same foundational stuff we know works against that style. So I'm with you. I've always thought like we leaned too hard into trying to play Big Ten ball when keeping ACC basketball may have actually, it might have helped them more in the tournament later in the year where you see ACC teams have a little bit more postseason success. So I hope that's the case. Steve, anything we haven't touched on here that you want to hit before we close this thing out?
No, I think that's it. It's a great basketball discussion again for the middle of the summer. I love getting to have it with you, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. And like I said, my next episode will be on the rivalries Maryland's developed over a decade plus in the Big Ten. Also going to be diving in a little bit to Michigan and what they've done over the offseason as part of that Big Ten off-season check-in series that I'm doing over the summer. And you can find me across all social media at Gorgon Sports.
I love that. Yeah. Route 1 rundown, everywhere you get podcasts. Go find it if you want more Summer Terps content. Can never get enough of this kind of stuff. Steve does a great job. So thanks for spending an hour with me on a holiday weekend. It'll be a little after this, maybe by the time people are listening to it, but Steve cleared up his 4th of July morning for me. So I very much appreciate that. Go have a good rest of your day, good weekend, all that stuff. And look forward to catching up with you here soon, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. Thanks so much for having me on. Hey, any holiday you need me, I'm there for you.
There you go, my guy. All right, everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button for us. Tell a friend, all that good stuff. iTunes review always helps, all those kind of good things. The show really appreciates it. Helps us grow the show. But yeah, let us know if there's other summer topics you want to get into, and we'll hit whatever you want. Maybe we'll do a mailbag here coming up just to go through any outstanding topics. But until then, fear the podcast.